To be woke is to see the world as butterflies and daisies, which in theory is great, but it's got to the stage where they can say some outrageous shit under the guise of this is inclusion, and if you disagree with us, you're the worst human in the world.
Realistically, a business is looking at the dollars at the end of the day. They don't care if someone sits or stands to piss. Why should that matter?
How much do we really need to sit down and go into the nitty-gritty of who that person sleeps with? Shouldn't be an issue in the workplace.
When you say Toyota was sponsoring drag shows, I think of like drag events. Like
That's what it should be.
Yeah, because they're a car company.
They were
sponsor drag races, not drag shows.
It's all virtue signaling. Toyota doesn't care. They're such a big company. They're about making good cars that last so people come back and they make money. Welcome to the Better Bloke podcast. I'm Matty.
I'm Rob.
And we're just a pair of average blokes on a mission to try and be a little bit less average.
We're going to speak about all things highs and lows of what it feels like to be a bloke, plus speak to some legends along the way about what it takes to be a better bloke. Let's get stuck in.
Today, we're tackling a cultural phenomenon that's been both criticized and celebrated, and that's the whole woke movement. Now, in the past decade, there's been a lot of changes, I guess, for the better when it comes to inclusion and equality and all those things. But it's come at, you could say, a cost, or definitely a change in society where we're seeing things like pretty much cancel culture. And off the back of that is the inability to talk about some of the tough conversations. So that's what we want to do today is have some of those conversations that is not necessarily shutting down all those positive things that come with the woke movement, but have a look at where are we in the spectrum of is enough enough? Can we go further? Or have we reached a pendulum where things start to be swinging back to normality?
Should we start off by like, what is woke culture? Like, what is it? Because everyone throws around this term like, oh, you're so woke. This is woke, 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 woke. Like, what is it?
I think to be woke is to see the world as butterflies and daisies. And we should always be better, and we should always be more inclusive, and we should always do this, which in theory is great. It's perfect. That's what we're doing. We're the Better Bloke Project. But it's got to the stage where some people, more on the extreme side, extreme left, extreme right, it's sort of give them an inch and they've taken a mile. And at the same time, it's become demonized to push back against these ideas because they can say some outrageous shit under the guise of this is inclusion or this is to make the world a better place. And if you disagree with us, you're the worst human in the world. And I think that's where the extreme version of the woke movement has gone to.
Does this sort of lean into that whole saying where the squeaky wheel gets the oil? Where like the minority that's being the most vocal, a lot of people are seeing them as, I guess, the noisemakers.
Yeah, the noisemakers, and they're also dealing with, you could say, contentious issues. So because these are the issues that spark conversation, outrage, compassion, those real heavy emotions, they come to the front of mind. They're the things we're seeing in the news and all those sort of things. So that's why we're hearing so much about it. And it's been like this crazy snowball effect since, I would say, about 2015, 16, things started to shift. And there's a lot of things that play into this. Obviously, social media has played a huge part, but corporations and news media, all those things definitely play into it. So
I think the way that social media works, which isn't dissimilar to how the news publications work and whatnot, something that creates so much controversy and will bring two sides together to argue about something, it's always going to be at the forefront of what they're going to try and promote. And this very topic is exactly that. You're bringing in two sides of the spectrum that is going to create so much conflict in the middle that it's just going to snowball, and they're like, okay, great, this is what we want.
Yeah, we can talk about the capital benefits and why this is incentivizing it later. But I wanted to talk about why we're doing this in the first place.
Yep.
And we put up a post a while ago, probably a couple months ago, talking about some changes that Toyota made as a company, where they essentially came out, they sent a memo out to all the members of their corporation saying, we're taking a step back from the initiatives we're doing in things like gender inclusivity, involvement with the LGBTQ plus people,
QIA plus.
all of it.
Yep.
And we're going to focus on career development, career readiness, and STEM research, science and maths and stuff like that, which as a essentially car automotive engineering company, why is that overly controversial? But the fact that they were pulling away from these human issues caused a controversy. We posted it, got a shitload of interaction and people talking about all sorts of things, and that's why we're doing this.
See, with what you just said there, with they've pulled away from human issues and it caused controversy, they've pulled away from one specific minority group issue, and then they're going to focus their funding into like stem cells and like medical research, which has a much larger.
That's not what STEM is.
Oh, wasn't I thought you said stem cells?
STEM, science, technology.
Oh,
but it is. What does STEM stand for?
Well, yeah, fuck. Look this up.
STEM education. It's pretty much like science.
Oh, so yeah, so
not medical research, but yes,
it is something overall that will benefit from, or that will benefit the wider community rather than focusing on a minority.
Well, it's in line with a technological company to do that sort of stuff. They didn't really have a lot of business in the first place being involved in that sort of stuff, other than appeasing a bunch of people for whatever brownie points, which is, I wanted to talk about this organization in the US, which has had a massive effect on companies like this.
That's the DEI?
Yes.
What is the DEI for those that are playing along at home?
The CEI is the Corporate Equality Index, is an annual benchmarking report published by the Human Rights Campaign, the largest LGBTIQ plus civil rights organization in the United States. The CEI evaluates and ranks major US corporations based on their policies, practices, and benefits that promote LGBTQ plus inclusion and equality in the workplace. The CEI rates companies on a scale of 0 to 100, blah, 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 for their policies on non-discrimination, equality, support for inclusion, and corporate social responsibility.
That's a specific company making it for that group. Where, from my perspective, I don't give a fuck who's doing the job. As long as that person's fit for the job, I don't care what they identify as. If we're going to focus on just doing it for the people who are identifying as A, B, C, D, E, F, G, isn't that sort of like then putting them in their own category, in a sense?
That's always been the issue, is like, you have to look at, say, minority or disenfranchised people. Let's use men and women in the workplace, because for the last 60 years we've been balancing this. Gender pay gap, all that sort of stuff. It was required that we did help women transition into this new era that we're in now.
Yep.
That's great. You do have to put in a little bit more effort. So that's kind of the route they're taking with this sort of thing, which I get. My problem here is these people are running companies. They have Toyota. They have whatever, insert company. And then this external company, board, organization, whatever they're called, has come out of their rabbit hole and said, oh yeah, we're coming in to rank you. We're going to put you on this index and tell everyone how good you are at dealing with this minority group. And that is going to dictate your behavior as a company, because pretty much trying to like fearmonger them into saying we'll make you look like you're not inclusive. I think that's a problem.
It very much is a problem.
Mm-hmm. And okay, so this is kind of what the conversation's about. For the last 10 years, this has been growing and growing and growing. And in the last 12 to 18 months, we've seen people starting to be like, okay, wait up. We've been playing along. We're inclusive. Like you said, we'll hire people. We don't care. Like, we want the job to get done. We want a nice work environment. Like, how much do we really need to sit down and go into the nitty gritty of who that person sleeps with? Shouldn't be an issue in the workplace.
Shouldn't at all. Even like realistically, a business is looking at the dollars at the end of the day. They don't care if someone sits or stands to piss. Why should that matter?
Yeah. And of course, there's prejudice with individual people in a company. Not saying the world's a perfect place. there's discrimination. It happens. But by and large, I think community society's come a really long way. We have to credit the woke movement in some way for that. So I'm not anti-woke. I think, honestly, I'm like 2010 liberal, but maybe not 2025 liberal, because I think it's changed.
I'm very much just chop and change. Just I've said it time and time again. Just be a good fucking person. Like it shouldn't matter. Like I said, if you sit or stand to piss, if you are a fucking microwave, you can identify as whatever you want. Just don't be a fuckwit, and don't try and make massive corporations change to suit your identity. Just do the fucking job. Do the job, get paid. Be fucking happy that you got a job. There's a lot of people out there that don't have jobs at the moment.
Elon Musk has made a lot of headlines in the last couple of years talking about the woke mind virus. That's what he likes to call it. And that is what we're talking about. It's he sees it as a virus getting pushed through society, and it's infiltrating these young people's minds, and then they're going out and spreading it. He's taken big steps, obviously buying Twitter, rebranding as X, campaigning with Trump. And it's spearheaded a movement that maybe enough is enough, and we need to find normality in the way we interact with each other. Stop so much hate, so much left, right side. And of course, the minute he does that, people are like, oh, okay, you're far right now. And it kind of just keeps this conflict going between everyone.
I'm in two minds about the way that sort of Musk is doing it, where he bought X to sort of stop censorship so they could have freedom of speech and whatnot, but then he's being very vocal about, he's not censoring it, but he's leaning one way. So it's not really creating like super free speech.
He's leaning one way, but he's letting the other people say whatever they want.
Yeah. I guess it is free speech, and he's just trying to manipulate it, I guess.
Well, he gets the most reach because he owns a platform.
That's very, very fair.
So,
it's like Tom from MySpace. He had the most amount of friends, didn't he?
So many friends. On him owning Twitter, I think that's played a massive part, is how the corporations and the outlets, the news media, the actual news publications, and of course platforms themselves, Facebook, Instagram, are letting these kind of messages reach an audience.
Or not letting these kind of messages reach audience. That's probably something that we've found a lot, that particularly with, if there's certain messaging that doesn't align with Meta and their core values, that message won't be shared to as many people.
Yeah. A recent example was the Joe Rogan episode with our mate Donald. By any means, any measurable statistics, that was the #1 trending video in the world that day.
Yep.
And it just didn't make it onto the trending page. It didn't even come up in a lot of people's search results when you search directly for that episode. And of course, YouTube and Microsoft and Google, they were all massive contributors to Kamala's campaign. So, of course, they don't want it seen, and they actually have the means to control it. So I think that in itself, when you look at that and you can see the manipulation happening on content that someone in a position doesn't want you to see, is a really powerful way of looking at how we're being manipulated.
While we're on this topic of speaking about that period of time that led into the US election, why do you think that us here in Australia was so heavily invested in the US election, even though there was a lot of things that were being censored for us to not easily find? Do you think it's because Australia's gone that far that, like, obviously we've said it time and time again, Australia is 5 to 10 behind the US with how everything works? Do you reckon we're going through that period where we're waiting on that swing to happen in Australia? So we were watching what was going to happen in the US to see, okay, are we starting to find a pendulum shift now in Australia?
I think the US election process is a freak show. It's like a circus, right? So the campaigns, the rallies, the debates, it's way more interesting than our system. And it's almost like a reality TV show, especially now you have characters like Trump, who is so polarizing. I think that's a lot of the reason Australia had eyes on it, just for entertainment sake. Of course, it had massive implications on our economy and all those things as well. I do believe him getting in is going to impact the future of our politics. US has always had a massive impact on what's going on here.
Substantially, or do you reckon it's only going to be a minuscule sort of impact?
I think it's early days to say because he hasn't done too much yet. So if things start going really well over there and then they start pushing the opposite over here and it's not going shit hot, I think there's a lot of legs to stand on by trying to change the way we do things here. Like, he's been heavily ridiculed by Albanese and stuff like that in the past. So he's going to eat his words a little bit. We'll have to see how that unfolds.
No, I think it's going to be interesting times to see how the political sphere in Australia changes around a lot of things after that. Well, yeah. So what else have you got on the woke space?
So Toyota was just an example that popped up, which really sort of like gave an example of this, but it's happened a bunch of times.
So within the corporate space?
Within the corporate space, because I think that's where so much of it starts, because these guys have been pressured into it by things like being told that if they don't keep everyone happy, they're going to lose customers. They're not going to be seen as responsible. They're not going to be seen as thought leaders, especially in the tech world. Being a thought leader and being on the edge of what's new and what's hot is important.
Well, but not even in the tech world, because if you look back to a little while ago, you had a major alcohol brand lean into trying to target sales towards a minority group. With, you had Bud Light and the Dylan Mulvaney saga.
Of course. And to be fair, that was part of a larger campaign where they got, I think, hundreds of different influencers and stuff involved. And for whatever reason, they chose Mulvaney to be part of their campaign. And there was huge backlash because, of course, most of their, I guess, consumers are probably middle American, more right-leaning in their views. And they felt that one of their companies that they liked and
had the same core values
as was bending to the pressures that wasn't true to who that company was.
See, originally I thought the exact same, and then I sort of took a step back, as most adults that actually have positive conversations do. I took a step back and I went, let's assess the situation. From my point of view, if I was in a marketing scene, I didn't really see it as a bad thing that they did, because I'm like, look, they know they've got this audience already sewn up with the amount of sort of, I guess you would call redneck Americans that are drinking Bud Light. Perhaps they had this minority group that they thought, okay, we're missing out on sales on. Maybe we try and lean in and capture all the market without actually thinking that small part of the market they were trying to capture actually disrupted the majority.
Yeah. It could have been that. I think.
Or do you think they were leaning into the index, which is what we spoke about before?
I think so. I think, like, I'm sure the people behind the company are not bigots. They're not sexist. And it probably is like, hey, look, maybe we should be a little bit more progressive. It's not going to hurt to say we think, I don't know, we think gay people should be able to get married. I'll say that. It's fine.
But love is love.
Yeah, love is love. It's fine as people. But the thing is that they have a brand, right? And the brand has some core values. And some people were mad about what it was saying. But I think most people were mad that it was talking about something it had no business talking about. It felt like they were reaching for brownie points. They were virtue signaling to the world, hey, we're part of this new age woke crew. Where they just didn't need to do that. They didn't need to partake. By not supporting trans people doesn't mean that you're anti-trans.
You can still support them without making a big song and dance about it. You just don't be anti.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that's what happened. And they pretty much change their marketing campaign, and they're not doing that anymore.
It's very fair because I think they took a bit of a
They took a beating.
bit of a hit.
They took a beating. So yeah, from a money perspective, they're not doing it anymore, but also probably because they didn't need to. And this has been seen across the board. So Netflix actually updated its internal policy where its corporate culture guidelines were changed to emphasize creative freedom and individual responsibility. The company advised employees that if they were uncomfortable with certain content, they might not be a good fit for Netflix. This came after Dave Chappelle's special. Employees were jumping up and down saying, hey, he's a racist, he's a bigot, he's a transphobe, he's a this, he's a that. And Netflix had the balls to stand up and say, art is art. He says what he wants, he's a comedian. Whereas I think 5-6 years ago, some of these streaming platforms and tech giants were bending over backwards trying not to be seen as against that kind of movement.
Well, didn't Dave Chappelle get in a lot of trouble a little while ago where everyone was trying to sort of go, hey, what he stands for is not what we want, and where most people have gone, he's a comedian and it's hilarious.
Yeah, a lot of people have, and there's been no shortage of examples where streaming platforms and stuff have pulled content. YouTube's pulled content. Meta pulls content all the time.
All the time. We know about it.
Yeah.
Meta also pulls monetization if you say something that they don't agree with.
Yeah, so it's a battle that everyone has to face, and creators especially. Comedians have a tough go of it because their job is to view the world and then like portray a funny take on it. And especially when you don't know what's joking and what's real. Dave Chappelle is obviously a master of the craft, but a lot of his jokes were reflecting on this 10-year period of the woke movement. So of course it comes across as he's making fun of the movement, which he is because he's a comedian commentating on a political landscape. That's his job. So,
well, I mean, even not looking at such an outside of Australia perspective, all you need to do is look locally at Isaac Butterfield. He is at the forefront of this left and right battle, I guess you could say, or a fight against the woke.
yeah, well, I would say he's a political commentator as much as he wants to. He is a comedian, obviously, but a lot of his YouTube videos in particular are commentary on news issues.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what stems from that then is the only way I can describe it as a shit fight, where he portrays his message in the comedic sense, but it's very much tiptoeing that line of what could be comedy and what could be, I guess, political commentating.
It's all political commentating with a funny twist.
It is, and it is hilarious.
And
I'm a big Butterfield fan.
Yeah, and it's his individual perspective, which he has every right to do.
Yep.
He sees something, he says his point of view, and that's why it's better than listening to Murdoch media that comes from who knows what, talking about some topic just in a way that, is it even anyone's opinion, or are they just trying to get a couple clicks?
Well, he had a court case come out of a couple of jokes that he wrote that it was against like the Human Rights Authority and all that sort of shit. It was a joke.
It was a joke at a show that people had paid to come and see, and they dragged his ass to the Human Rights Campaign or committee or whatever and put him in front of a judge or a committee, a board, whatever's there. He won. But it just, that probably segues into the negative side effects of woke culture. Because the positive sides are more inclusivity and everyone feeling safer and more able to be themselves is good.
It's a very good thing.
It's a good thing. I'm 100% a supporter of that. What I'm not a supporter of is being too afraid to talk about stuff. Like even this conversation we're having now, having to really think about what we say. We're saying it on the fly. This isn't scripted. I'm sure you can take a snippet and I sound a bit like a bigot. But people shouldn't be afraid to talk about these things, and especially afraid to put out their opinions. You can come at us and give us your opinions and we can have a discussion, and maybe one of us might change our view a little bit. That's how progression happens.
That is 100% how progression happens. You can't change without discussions. And you can have a discussion without getting heated, have positive discussions as adults do.
So
It's very, very hard to do on social media, though.
yeah. So back to Butterfield, he shouldn't be afraid to say those things. He shouldn't be afraid to get his ass dragged in front of some commission board to tell him if he's violated someone's human rights. As long as he's not hurting anyone, and hurting feelings doesn't count. I'm sorry, guys. If he said something he believes to be true and it's not inciting violence or anything like that, he's free to do so.
Do you think that comes down a lot to, and I know we've spoken about this, the messenger? Because I know he got dragged in front of that board for that. But there has been American comedians come over and said very, very similar jokes, and they've been applauded for it. Is it just because it was him and he is a controversial figure?
The messenger is important. Like,
Yeah.
he's got a target on his back from a lot of years because he pretty much goes up against these mainstream media. There was an interesting conversation. The Tate brothers did Piers Morgan.
Yes.
And Andrew Tate, as much as people don't like him, raised a very interesting point against Piers. Piers was pushing on him saying, you're telling people that a woman should stay at home and she shouldn't work, all this thing. Tate said, no, I'm saying I wouldn't want my woman to. That's my views. And then he raised, Piers was good friends with Richard Dawkins, 20, 30 years ago, thought leader in all things science and philosophy and things like that. And he said that exact same thing 30 years ago. He said he wouldn't want his wife to be burdened by the responsibilities of working. Very different messenger. No one said shit when he said it. Tate says that the world loses their mind.
It all comes down to messenger then.
Doesn't all come down, but yeah.
Mind you, a lot of the stuff that Tate says, he intentionally antagonizes with his short form content for that reason.
Messenger, the delivery.
Yes.
Tate's got a different delivery.
Yeah.
Jumping onto the news outlets.
Yep.
Now, this is where I think there's a massive, massive, massive issue. And that's news outlets don't really care. They lean one way or the other. And we saw it all through the US political campaign. Pretty much all the mainstream outlets were sort of Kamala leaning, but we see it on all the issues as well, whether it's trans or LGBTQ, all those things. They'll push a message, but they'll do it in an antagonistic way. And they'll fire up the comments, and then they'll get people to click the link, and then they'll get people to watch all the ads all over their website. You go on, it's ads everywhere. If you think they're doing that for any other reason than to make money, you're wrong. They're in the business of making money. They're in the business.
Depends on what it is, though, because I have been noticing a lot lately, and this comes into what we're talking about with censorship in the media and their agendas. I've been seeing on a lot of news outlets at the moment that they'll put up a post that it's very, very antagonistic, or they want to push their agenda. They'll turn the comments off or they'll delete the comments. If you're going to post something that is going to create discussion and you're doing it intentionally to fire up the crowd, let them have those conversations. That's what you're doing. Don't go deleting comments to try and preach your message or just intentionally shut people's opinions down. If you're going to do that, you may as well not post the content. So speaking of, segueing from that, something in the news within the last couple of weeks, leading up to something that's happening next month, is Australia Day. And a very hot topic at the moment has been a Australian company that owns a rather large portion of the pubs, has decided that they made a media release saying that they're not going to allow the celebration of Australia Day at their pubs.
About 200 venues.
Yeah, not a small company.
Yeah.
This was met with a bit of backlash, and their social media copped some flack. They were then deleting the comments because they didn't like what they got. Understandable. You're running a brand, you're running a business. You don't want negative comments on there. But they've lent into trying to do what they felt was the right thing to appease the minority. Because there is, like, a lot of people do get upset on Australia Day. There is a lot of conflicting feelings about Australia Day and what it represents. But I would say the majority of Australia celebrate Australia on Australia Day, January 26th. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. It's been contention on Australia Day for years. If they're a private company, if they want to make that decision, they can, but they have to be accepting of what comes with that.
Yes.
And they weren't. They did reverse the decision in the end.
They put out a statement saying that we're not going to be in charge of who wants to celebrate Australia Day at our venues. So, bit of a backpedal.
Yeah, they backpedaled.
They did it very, very well. They worded it well. So it was a backpedal without physically saying we fucked up.
Yeah.
But
and like, what was the intention behind them banning it or stopping it in the first place is really the question. Was it that the CEO and owner of this group or whatever it is was genuinely on the side of caring? Or was it virtue signaling to the rest of Australia? So hopefully they get seen as a better light for all the other things happening throughout the year.
I feel like it may have been virtue signaling to an extent, because the way that the original statement was worded was, we understand that this day causes pain for some, which, it does. Like, we literally just said that. There's no denying that that day can cause, issues. But to then backpedal on it and say, hey, no, you can celebrate whatever you want because of the backlash that everyone copped. Yeah. It's not a great look.
Make a decision, stand the ground.
Yeah.
But if you're doing it to virtue signal, understand that you're appeasing a minority and not the majority. And if it doesn't align with your brand and who your values are, it's not authentic. Even as a corporation, it's not authentic. And we've seen this. They're as bad as the news outlets. I'm going to rant again here. Is the virtue signaling from brands and corporations. That's the reason Toyota in the first place got into doing this. They were sponsoring drag shows in schools. Toyota. Why? Right.
See, when you say Toyota was sponsoring drag shows, I think of drag events.
That's what it should be.
Yeah, because they're a car company.
They were
sponsor drag races, not drag shows.
They were involved in gender inclusivity projects and all this stuff with that community in schools, among a whole range of other things to get these points on the inclusion and brownie system from the Human Rights Campaign. It was all virtue signaling. Toyota doesn't care. They're such a big company. They're about making good cars that last so people come back and they make money. That's what they do. You see it in smaller brands. You see it a lot in activewear companies when they're doing all the plus size stuff. I'm all for getting people to be better, but you see it sometimes and you're like, bro, I genuinely think you're just virtue signaling to try and make people think you're a good person, to buy your shit.
See, that's where I see it from the marketing perspectives. I feel like a lot of these brands target these minorities to try and capture more market share, essentially. Where's the line of trying to capture more market share and virtue signaling? That's the thing. Because if someone does it without making a big fuss about it, they're not going to. It defeats the marketing, if that makes sense.
I get it. If you want to go up to size 24 in your active leisure gear, you are going to get more market in.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Those people need to have brands for that as well. But if you're a company that doesn't have a product or service that is directly related to, let's say when companies are talking about the trans issue, those people represent a very, very, very small amount of people of the population. You're not gaining market share there. What you're doing is you're telling the rest of the 99.9% of people in that society that these are your visions and you are a forward-thinking, progressive company, which is not a bad thing, and they should buy more of your shit to support your mission.
Is that something that, I could be wrong with this, I'm sure you're going to know because you're very in with your brands and whatnot. Did Lorna Jane get in trouble a few years ago for only hiring certain sized employees?
I don't want to comment on that because I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
But I've heard something about it.
Okay. I don't know if it was Lorna Jane, but I know it was an active wear for women company, and
yeah, I know.
Lorna Jane is the company when I think active wear for women.
Oh, the guy that started Lululemon, you should read some of the quotes he said about what the brand has become now that he sold it.
Yeah.
It's kind of bigotry, to be honest. He's a bit of a bigot. But he started this fitness brand for hot people. If that's what he wants to do, that's what he wants to do.
It's fair. It's his brand at the end of the day. That will do us for the woke chat and discussing all things diversity and inclusion within the sphere that we're in with social media and dealing with people. And I think the message is just be a good fucking person. It's pretty simple.
That's Rob's favorite thing. Be a good fucking person. That's what it comes down to. Like, I don't know.
It doesn't matter if you sit, you stand, you squat, piss however you want. Just don't be shit. So we've realised that we made a mistake and we didn't actually do Bloke of the Week, which is a regular segment that we're going to start doing.
So Bloke of the Week this week is our admin, Ongi.
Ongi is someone who has done so much for the community just with the advice that he gives. And he takes the time to actually explain how blokes feel in a way that it makes sense in our heads when we read it, but we probably don't have the ways to properly articulate it until we see his words.
He'll jump on a random post and really write quite an articulate, well thought out response, really long essay type comments. And the boys love it. I've seen people call him Jesus, all sorts of stuff, but he's doing it from a perspective that he has lived through it. He admits all the things that he's kind of learnt the hard way and all the benefits he's found. He's a successful guy. He's got the great family. He's got a lot of things guys are searching for. And I think that's why his advice is so sound.
So big shout out to Ongi. You are our Bloke of the Week.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you want to find out more about the project and some of the things we stand for, check out betterblokeproject.org or jump onto any of our socials, Better Bloke Project on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, wherever you want to find us.
If you jump over to betterblokeproject.org, you will see at the top there is a donate button. From there, you can help us keep rolling out the events to help us benefit blokes in the community and just try and make a positive change to blokes' lives. On that note, we will leave you there, and as always, be better. Thanks for tuning into today's episode of Better Bloke. If you got anything out of it, show some love by dropping a 5-star review below.
If you want to learn more about everything we're doing, head to the description, hit the links and follow us on the socials. If you want to learn more about the project, head to betterblokeproject.org.